Hey, what's happening, y'all? So today I want to make a video that's kind of been a long time coming, but I haven't really had the context to talk about it on the channel, and I finally do. So today we're going to be discussing acoustics and soundproofing. Let's get to it. You silly mutt. Well, most of you who have been watching my channel for a while know that I like to kind of start things off with a little bit of context. So, what's kind of been going through my head for a while that I hadn't really found a way to really put into content or anything like that has been like, even when I was back at the school district and building my studio room there, everyone, whether they were a musician or someone who wasn't involved in media production at all, or even media novices, like anyone who wasn't heavily invested in the world of sound and acoustics in general, tended to use different words interchangeably. Usually soundproofing. Like I'm putting panels on the wall and like, oh, you're putting up soundproofing. It's always an awkward situation, right? Because I I I like to educate. I like to put information out there. I like to help people learn, hence doing a YouTube channel. But I have discovered that that's not always appreciated, and especially in this circumstance, right? So say they do understand the differences between acoustic treatment and soundproofing, and they just pick the wrong word. Well, then I'm being a pedantic jerk if I say anything. And what if they don't understand the differences, and I just go on educating them when they didn't ask for it? Well, then I'm being a pretentious jerk for saying anything. So I've just kind of kept my mouth shut usually in those situations, unless I'm talking with somebody that I know has an active interest. And it's been kind of awkward, and it's made me feel like this is information that needs to be out there. Now, most of you watching this channel, this probably is going to be old news to you. It's not going to be anything revelatory, but I've encountered enough lack of knowledge and confusion that I feel like it's worth saying. And so what's kind of come up here recently is, I can't say too much, but there's some cool stuff coming for Audio Mutt. There's a chance that we could be getting our own physical location, integrated with some other things happening in the Granbury area. It's still early stages, so I can't go into too much detail right now, but there's potential for some really cool stuff coming down the line. And I'm pretty daggum excited, and there's going to involve some partnerships, so I'm going to need to coordinate with them as far as when we can start putting out information, all that kind of stuff. But part of that is kind of like what I had to do at the school district. I've got to turn a space into a studio, and that has necessitated me boning up on my acoustics. And I will say, so if you have any interest in this subject at all, the Master Handbook of Acoustics, this is the 5th edition. They might have a more recent one out, but by F. Alton Everest and Ken C. Pullman. I'll put a link in the video description. This was my acoustic textbook back in college, and it is amazing. This has helped me design and figure out what I need for the space I'm going to be in, and it's phenomenal. Very handy resource if you're interested at all in acoustics. So that's kind of been a thing, and then as part of that process, I ended up having conversations, and it was one of those, I ended up in that situation again where I'm wanting to educate, but I'm not sure how it's going to come across. And so I'm like, you know what? Perfect opportunity, especially because I'm engaged in a project you can see back here to create the different panels and things that I'm going to need for this space. And so this is a great opportunity to actually create some content talking about the issue and putting it out there so that those who have an interest, I can point to, and those who don't, I don't have to pester them with it, and can know that I've done my due diligence to get good, accurate information out into the interwebs. All right. So that's the big scope of what's been going on. There's lots of things happening behind the scenes. It's pretty cool. But let's get to the topic at hand. What I encounter most often is people use soundproofing to talk about everything. And that is not the case. So you've got actually two completely different disciplines. Soundproofing is best handled during the construction stage of a building. And the whole point is to prevent sound from getting out of the environment in which it's produced. And this can be applicable for a bunch of things. This can be applicable for a jam room if you're in a band, or a rehearsal space if you are a business owner and you're like renting out rehearsal spaces. This can be accurate for home theater enthusiasts who want to be able to crank up a movie and enjoy the experience and not wake up their kids, down the hall. This can be, it's definitely applicable for studio environments. So anywhere, or even live performance venues, anywhere that there is sound, soundproofing is going to be applicable, because what you're doing is you're keeping the sound in the space. Whereas acoustic treatment is a completely different discipline. That is all about controlling the sound that is in the room and making it sound its best. Again, this is applicable for most of those same places. Home theater enthusiasts don't think about this often enough. And I've talked about this with friends repeatedly, that I've seen people buy thousands of dollars worth of home theater equipment and set it up and then wonder why it doesn't sound that good. Well, the room is crap. There's no carpeting. It's completely like there's tile, short ceilings, nothing on the walls to diffuse or absorb any of the sound. There's tons of reverb. It's like a perfectly square room. There's just all these things that go into making that sound. And I tell them, you spend a few $100s worth of acoustic treatment in this space, and you will get way more bang for your buck than you will with a $3,000 or $4,000 entertainment system. Now, I'm not saying that those kinds of cool toys are bad or not worth the money, but if you take super high-end studio monitors and you put them in a bad space, you're not going to get your money's worth out of those studio monitors. Same thing for home theater systems, same thing for jam rooms, same thing for live performance venues. Acoustics is a thing that has to be considered, but here's the catch. Doing acoustic treatment and spending that money isn't going to do the same thing as soundproofing. And I know that's the thing that a lot of people get confused, where you put up acoustic panels and they think, well, that's absorbing sound, right? It's going to keep the sound from getting out of the room. Not how it works at all. So let's talk about soundproofing and how you can do it. You really only have a couple tools to get the job done. One is mass. Okay, so as sound hits an object, sound is kinetic energy. All it really is the movement of air. So as I'm speaking, it's compressing air molecules that are then pushing air molecules that are then compressing, that are then pushing. It's that action at different frequencies and wavelengths which allows us to hear and perceive sound. So when I'm speaking and it hits, I'm just grabbing the nearest object, or let's see, where's my book? Right? So we've got an object that's loaded with mass, with matter, and the sound wave hits that. It now has to expend a lot more of its kinetic energy to make these molecules move than it would if it was just moving more air. Okay? So if you do something like use extra thick drywall, or there's a thing called mass-loaded vinyl, which is essentially a type of rubber. And what you would do is you install your first set of drywall, and then you put up this layer of vinyl, and then you put another layer of drywall over that, and then you'll tape and float that second layer of drywall just like normal. Not only do you have two layers of drywall there, but then you have another type of matter in between that. So it's requiring more and more kinetic energy in order to move those molecules. And the denser the molecules are, the harder it is to move. Because, believe it or not, sound can transfer through any kind of matter. That's why those little tin can with the string telephone machines work. Because it can still vibrate that can, which then can vibrate the string, which then can move all along to that other can, vibrate the can, and vibrate the air inside the can so that the other person can hear. It's just physics. So that's what sound is, and it can transfer through any medium. It will transfer through water. The only environment in which sound won't transfer would be in a complete vacuum, because there's no molecules around to move. That's a whole other meaning to the horror movie cliche. In space, no one can hear you scream. You know, it's actually a lot more true than you might think. So that's one trick. Another thing that I've heard of, and I was researching when it came to this new environment that we're potentially going to be in, is using acoustic glue. So there's a company out there called Green Glue. And then they've got some competitors. There's an acoustic glue company, and there's a couple of them, not a whole lot. And what they purport is that you use that instead of the mass-loaded vinyl. And so you put up your drywall, and then, put up your framing, put up your drywall, and then you get your other sheet of drywall, and you put this glue stuff evenly all across the back of it, and then you put it up, preferably kind of over the seams of the two drywall pieces in your first layer, so that then you're kind of also creating a seal and doing that, right? And then you're just basically doing more drywall, but this glue stays viscous, it stays flexible, and is supposedly really good at adding a layer with which it's more difficult for sound to travel through. Now, a recent thing that I've come across is that there is a certain type of carpet glue, which is like a multi-purpose interior-exterior carpet glue, that a lot of people are saying works just as well or better for a fraction of the price. Because Green Glue and its competitors are expensive. So expensive. It's like $200 or $300 for a 5-gallon bucket. It's crazy. So like it would take thousands of dollars to do a full room with Green Glue, whereas carpet glue is a fraction of the price. But it has to be the certain type of carpet glue. You can't get just any regular interior carpet glue because it's going to dry. You need the stuff that's going to stay viscous, it's going to stay flexible, but you just do the same thing. You paint it along the backside of that drywall, the sheetrock, put it up on the wall, screw that one in, and there you go. So that's one thing, is you're creating mass, you're creating density, you're creating things that it's harder for sound to make move and therefore transfer and then to the next room. Okay? The next tool you have in your disposal for soundproofing is space. Because as that kinetic energy moves down, down the line, it loses energy as particles bounce against each other and so on and so forth. Newton's laws of physics, like that's all this is right now. Okay, so a thing that people will do is what's called creating a room within a room. So you have a big room, or maybe even a small room, like this garage, right? And it already has its existing walls. So what you would do is you would leave about an inch gap between this wall, and then you build another wall, a whole separate framing system, a separate set of drywall, a separate set of insulation, all that stuff. And so what you're doing is, you're adding more mass, right? You're creating another surface for those air particles to hit and try and move and transfer out. And then there's a gap where it has to transfer back into air and then hit another space, and then so on and so forth. So if you combine mass with space, there you get even more effective soundproofing. So your third and last real tool for soundproofing is sealing. So I'll tell you, in this potential new space, there are some girders that I noticed pass through the drywall into the adjoining room, which is a separate organization. Okay. And the owners were talking to me and sounding kind of frustrated because you could be talking in just a normal voice or even a quiet voice in their place, and the place next to them could hear you clear as day. Right? And I'm looking around, I'm going, that's why. Okay? Because sound is the movement of air, or it's the movement of particles, but in this case we're talking air because that's how we usually hear. If there is any gap, we're talking gaps around doorways, we're talking gaps in windowsills, we're talking especially this gap where they didn't caulk any sealant around where that girder passes through the drywall. Air finds gaps and it moves through, and thereby it transmits sound. Period, case closed, end of story. So your third tool is to seal gaps. Okay, with doors, they make rubber gaskets that you can fit around a door frame. That can help seal gaps. With things like that girder, they make acoustic sealant, which comes in caulk tubes. You put it in a caulk gun, and you just fill those gaps as best you can. Fill any gaps that you can. There's even your electrical outlets. Now they make a kind of putty that you can fit around the back of an electrical outlet so that when you mount it in, it can kind of squeeze and create a seal. That can get kind of complicated, and if I was to prioritize, I would put electrical outlets and sealing those kind of towards the bottom, because there's enough going on there that leakage is going to be minimal. But find the big gaps. Find the places in the door where there are big gaps for air to move. If you've got windows, check your windows and the seals around them. Especially look for big, blatant holes. All right? And so those are your three tools to deal with soundproofing: mass, space, and seals. If you do that, you can keep most sound isolated to a particular room, or at least minimize the transfer so that unless you're just rip-roaring, you're not going to bother anybody. Again, if you're a home theater enthusiast and you want to be able to really enjoy a movie, but you don't want to wake up I've got a 1.5-year-old, so wake up the baby down the hall. Those are some things you can do. You can get some drywall and put it up over your existing drywall, tape float it, and paint just like you regular would, and only miss a little bit of space, find those gaps and seal them, and you'll be in good shape. So that's soundproofing. Now we move on to acoustic treatment. That's controlling the frequencies and the reflections inside a room so that the room can sound its best. And you really only have a few tools in which to do that as well. So one is actual design, okay? Talking about that and actually giving you a good synopsis would involve a lot of math and equations and things I don't necessarily want to go into because I'm not a master acoustician. That's why I have this book to serve as a reference guide to help me figure things out. But there are certain things, parallel surfaces, because sound does bounce off of things. So when the air particles that are creating my voice hit that wall, part of the kinetic energy is going to transfer into the wall and cause it to vibrate and move forward. However, because we're talking about a very dense item versus a not dense particle like air, part of that kinetic energy is actually going to bounce back and cause those same frequencies and wavelengths to come back into the room, and that creates a sound that we know as space and reverb and how we're used to hearing a natural environment. Okay? That's also part of how sound works. But what happens If you have the same frequencies bouncing off of this wall and bouncing off of this wall, and at certain points in a room, certain frequencies are going to meet up. And maybe one of them, the air particles are compressing, while the other reflection is expanding. What's going to happen there? Well, if they're doing the same thing at the same amount, at the same space, they're going to cancel each other out. And that's where you get a null point for certain frequencies. Same thing, if one reflection is compressing and the other reflection from the other direction is compressing too, you're going to get a boost point where that particular frequency, that particular wavelength is going to get louder at that one spot in the room. So these are called nodes and antinodes. And so maybe having walls that aren't exactly parallel, kind of dipped out a little bit, that can help a little bit. Having slanted ceilings can help. Reflections are still going to happen, but you can control the angle of the reflections so that they're not really hitting the listening position. Having not a square room where the exact same frequencies are doing the exact same thing in multiple directions, that helps. So those are some construction things, but for the most part, if you're watching this channel, if you're in my boat, you're not going to have the option of guiding construction to build a perfect listening environment. You're just not. You're looking at, what can I do with the space I have, for the love of Pete, all right? So there, one of your tools is absorption. It's having an object that the sound wave can hit, and most of it can be absorbed, right? And so you've got things like this acoustic panel here. Righty ho there, neighbor. So this is a wooden frame with a sheet of Owens Corning 703 fiberglass insulation in it, and fabric wrapped around. And let me turn it without hitting the camera, preferably. And I just stapled it to the frame, put some felt things so it doesn't damage the wall, and got some hangers. Got one on that side and two over here so that it can be hung either vertical orientation or horizontal orientation. Mineral wool is also a really effective insulation, but it's basically just insulation. It's nothing special. You can get it at Lowe's or Home Depot or your preferred hardware store. You just want to look for something like mineral wool or Owens Corning 703, things that are kind of rated for acoustical absorption. Another thing to look out for is fire rating. Some insulations are more prone to catching fire, and some are actually like treated to prevent that. So better safe than sorry. But anyway, the sound hits the panel and gets absorbed by that insulation, right? The kinetic energy hits this and it gets dispersed into thermal energy, right? You're taking kinetic movement, transferring it into heat. But these things only work for specific frequencies. The deeper the insulation you use, the lower the frequencies that it's going to affect. They're very effective. They work really well. I like these 10 times better than I like the foam stuff. Most people that I see are using the foam, and the foam does work. I'm not trying to trash talk like Oralex or anything. But these homemade panels, I just think are far superior. And the materials are going to cost you anywhere from 40 to 60 bucks. So you can build, and this is 2 feet wide by 4 feet tall. So you can get a lot of panel covering a large surface area for very little money. And you don't need to, completely plaster a wall with them. You can just get some. And you can use whatever fabric you want. You want something that's kind of porous. So I've seen some people use suede. You can even get them like printed and like print designs on them and then, staple that over it. You can make them look really cool and decorative. There's a couple people that I know that I've talked to that like the home theater thing, and I've tried to convince them like let's do some acoustic panels. Like you provide the materials, I'll build them for you. Because I think it'd be really cool to like print old movie posters on a fabric and then put that over and like use that to decorate a home theater space. I just think that'd be super cool. And you can do stuff like that with these panels. They don't have to be ugly. They don't have to be weird or like obvious acoustic treatment. They can just, I mean, in theory, you might could even take like a canvas that, like a painted canvas, and depending on how like thick the framing is, put some insulation in that and then kind of cover the back and hang that. There's all sorts of stuff that you could do to create absorption in a room. And so what you're doing there is you're eliminating these reflections. So the sound's getting absorbed to a degree. There's still going to be some sound reflecting off the panel, but not near as much. And that's going to dissipate. So you're not going to get, all these weird reflections and things happening in the room. You're going to decrease the amount of reverb in the room. So you're going to be able to hear what's coming out of your speakers more accurately. All right. Kind of along with absorption, in addition to these, how I talked about the thicker the insulation, the lower the frequencies it can affect. So frequencies being pitch, so lower being the boomy, low end stuff. If you're adjusting the EQ on whatever your system is, and you dial up the bass, those are the frequencies that we're talking about. Low frequencies is your bass, in layman's terms. So, what do you do if you don't want these freaking 4, 6, 8-inch things coming off your wall all around your room? No one wants that. So you get these 2-inch thick panels to do most of your work. Low frequencies tend to be more omnidirectional. And low frequencies meaning bass frequencies, your low end, your thumpiness, and a lot of people like lots of that. But if it's not controlled, it can make things sound muddy and unpleasant. You stop being able to understand what people are saying, or you start missing clarity in things. And so we want to control those low frequencies. All right. But one thing you'll notice about them is they tend to, what we say, collect in corners because they are omnidirectional. Low frequencies tend to just kind of spread out. Higher frequencies, higher pitches, tend to be more directional. So as an example, right now I'm speaking to my camera right here, and the microphone is right above it. So you should be getting a fairly even, direct sound. Now, as I start rotating my head and talking over in this direction, even though I'm talking at the same timbre, at the same volume, it's likely sounding a little bit more muffled, a little bit less clear, right? That's because the low frequencies of my voice are coming out this way and radiating out, whereas my higher frequencies of my voice are going direct to where I'm speaking. So we can use this to our advantage when we're trying to control the acoustics of a room. So as the lower frequencies are radiating out, they're going over to the corners and they're getting more collected over in that environment. So what we do is we get what's called bass traps, all right? These are absorptive panels, kind of like this, but they're specifically, 4, 6, 8 inches deep. Some of them are kind of triangle shaped, specifically 4 corners. Some are more flat, just like this. But the essence is you mount those thicker panels in your corners, right? And so that's going to specifically reduce the amount of low end that's collecting in those corners and then bouncing back for you to hear. Right? Kind of tricky. So, but that's absorption, that's your thing. Okay? Put your 2-inch panels, or even your 1-inchers. 2-inchers are a little bit better because they a little bit, thicker panel, a little bit more into the lower mids kind of area. All right, and you're going to put those around your walls, and then you get your nice thick 4 to 6 inch thick panels, And you're going to put those in your corners. And there you've got some really nice absorption to control what's happening in the room. The last tool that you're going to have at your disposal for acoustic treatment is what's called diffusion, which is what I'm building back here. So let me get my finish. Oh, these are kind of heavy because they are wood. Aha, check that out. So this is let me get back in my center here. So you see that? Look at that. Isn't that cool? So that is a 2 foot by 2 foot sheet of plywood. And then I got some 1 inch by 2 inch pieces of wood to use as trim. And then each of these is supposed to be, I got some 8 foot long sticks of 2 inch by 2 inch trimming, and then cut those down into individual size blocks. So I've got some 1 inch blocks, 2 inch blocks, 3 inch blocks, and 4 inch blocks. One thing to note, 2 inch by 2 inch is actually 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. They don't actually make any of these 2x4s, 1x2s, 2x2s. None of them anymore are actually the size that they purport to be. So when you're doing the math on this, it's important to know. There are different kinds of diffusers. There are wooden slat diffusers. There's all kinds. Quadratic diffusers. This one in particular is called a prime root diffuser, also known as a skyline diffuser. And what it does is there's a mathematical equation that uses the roots of prime numbers to determine the length and placement of different blocks on a panel. The size of your block, whether you're using 1 inch blocks, 2 inch blocks, or 1.5 inch blocks, that's going to determine the highest frequency that your panel can deflect. At 1.5 inches, the highest this can reach is around 4.6 kilohertz. And the length, the longer your longest blocks are, the lower the frequency that the panel can affect. So with my longest blocks being 4 inches, this can get down to about 1.5 kilohertz. So mostly in the mid-range is what this particular panel can do. But you can build them yourself. There is a online calculator that you can use. I'll put a link in the description to figure out what blocks to place where. So the whole point of this, because you'll notice this isn't absorptive. Like, I even painted a gloss on this, right? This is not going to absorb sound. But what it does is break up sound waves. All right? It's pretty interesting. So as sound waves come out your speaker and they hit this, they hit the blocks, that are all different, placed differently and at different lengths, and they break up and start bouncing in different directions, right? And at different times. So essentially what you're doing is any of those standing waves, the nodes and antinodes we're talking about, this is breaking them up at the frequency range that it's effective at, because it's shooting all those reflections that would be causing that off in different directions and breaking up that sound wave. So you're controlling your nodes and antinodes without removing reverb, without removing the natural room sound, which is incredibly important, right? We are not used to hearing things in a flat environment. We're used to room sound. We're used to hearing cars passing by in the HVAC. We're used to hearing room reflections. We're used to hearing all of that. There's videos online you can watch where there's a room that they completely padded up so that there are no room reflections whatsoever. There's no HVAC, there's no room sound at all. And people step in there and they talk about how eerie it feels. It just feels weird and unnatural. So when you're building a space or when you're trying to control an existing space, you don't want to use nothing but absorption because it's gonna sound weird. And especially if you're working in a studio environment, you're gonna end up making wrong decisions based off of what you're hearing because what you're hearing isn't accurate. You're not hearing what everyone else is gonna be hearing. So that's where diffusers come in, so that you can break up those sound waves, get a good, tight, controlled, accurate sound without completely neutralizing the sound of your room. Anyway, so those are your tools for acoustic treatment, right? You're going to use absorption, you're going to use bass traps. If you have the opportunity to use construction to actually control stuff, go for it. And diffusion and absorption are your friends. Like even if you're not in a perfect room, right? If you just have a room that you want to be your home theater, if you just have a room that you want to make your studio, controlling the acoustics of your space doesn't have to be prohibitively expensive at all. I think the most expensive part of this project for me was that miter saw back there, which I got at Lowe's for on sale for $120. It's got a little 9-inch blade. It's not anything special, but for cutting 1x2s and 2x2s, and then I've got this reciprocating saw. It's all you really need for this. If you're building the acoustic panels, like a little staple gun helps, and maybe a drill, things that most people will have somewhere in their home to use. And then the materials for 2 panels, I think, for 2 of the diffuser panels, I think it was just a little bit under $80. I think for closer to 150, you could get enough to build 4 of the panels. The biggest investment is time. It does take a lot of time to make the diffuser panels, which is why these prime root diffusers or skyline diffusers, as they're sometimes called, can retail for upwards of $300, $400. There's one that I found made here in the US that is selling for $425 for 1 panel. Yeah, no thank you. I'll build my own. And same thing with these, I already said, these absorptive panels, $40 to $60 for the materials to build them. It doesn't have to be crazy expensive, and it goes a long way. And you can do cool stuff with them. I mean, dude, these diffusers look awesome. They're not ugly by any means. Like they look like they could be artwork that you put on a wall anyway. So you can make your space look beautiful and be awesomely functional. There's lots of math that can be involved there that honestly I did well in class, but after all these years it's kind of over my head now. Again, that's why I had that textbook. It saves my life when I have to do this stuff. And there's different approaches you can take. Like at the new space, what I'm probably going to do is what's called live end, dead end. So I'm going to put absorptive panels behind my studio monitors, right? Behind the speakers, to control those early reflections. Things as it bouncing off the walls and coming immediately to my ears. That can really throw off a mix. So I'm going to put a lot of absorption like right in front of me. And then behind me, behind the mixing position, I'm going to put the diffusers and maybe 1 or 2 absorptive panels. So we're going to have a dead end, right up in front of me, right up in front of the right behind the studio monitors, and then we're going to have so that's going to be the dead end, and then a live end behind me where those reflections are still happening, but they're getting broken up by the diffusers. And then, of course, doing bass traps in relevant corners, right? So there's a couple concepts you can use that even if you're not doing the math of like, okay, well, what is our desired T60 and what frequencies are going to be the problem frequencies in this room? Like, that's really good stuff to know. And if you've got an acoustic textbook like that one that you can look that up and figure it out, take measurements, or if you know an acoustician who can do that for you, that's awesome. But you don't have to have that in order to have a good room. Too many of us put off making a space as good as we can because we don't feel like we can do it at an expert level, right? And that's where you end up hurting yourself in the long run. So I advise you, especially if you've got the tools to make the job happen, go and do it, man. If you've got a home theater, if you've got a live performance venue, if you've got whatever, right? If you've got a studio, if you've got a jam space, just build you some panels. Build you some panels, put them up, and listen to the difference it makes. I mean, I wish I had Darbs here with me to verify, because we talked about this at length. And then we had a moment where he came into a room that I had treated and was immediately like, whoa, why? And we played back some of his favorite tracks out of the studio monitors in that space. And he's going, dude, those speakers sound awesome. I'm going, it's not the speakers. It's not the speakers. It's the room. And then he started listening closely. He's going, man, I think you're right. And so I just kind of blew his mind with all that. I'm telling you, if it is the biggest difference maker, whether it comes to music production or just music listening or gaming or whatever, right? That's why so many people are listening with headphones and things, because it's a more controlled environment. You're not dealing with a bad room. But if you have a good room where you can get more accurate sense of space through speakers, it will blow your mind. And it's fairly easy to do with a few tools, tape measure, and a little know-how. And there are plenty of tutorials up all over YouTube on how to build diffusers and how to build absorptive panels, and you can get her done. So that's been a long rant. I haven't done one of these long talking head videos in a while. I try to avoid talking head videos. I like my stuff to be more involved and productive. But this is a subject I care deeply about and I'm very enthusiastic about, as you can tell. I really like acoustics, and I hope this has helped clear up anything if you weren't 100% sure on, like, okay, well, what's acoustic treatment versus what is soundproofing versus, and what's mass versus what's space versus what goes into soundproofing, what goes into acoustics. I hope this was a good high-level overview of what's involved there. It's a really interesting subject, and it's something, me personally, that I think should be more in the public mindset. Especially, I bring up the home theater thing a lot because I'm a gamer and I like playing games. I like watching movies, and my buddy Darbs, he's way into a bit of a gamer, but mostly movies and TV shows. Major cinephile. And it's amazing how much of the experience that we lose out, especially now that fewer people are going to theaters, actual big theaters as much, that we're missing out on some of these experiences at home just because there's not a common understanding of the importance that your room plays in your experience of enjoyment. It's kind of sad to me that this isn't more well known. And it wasn't well known to me until I went to school and started studying this crap. It's very interesting, and I hope that some of this, if nothing else, brings a little bit of exposure to the subject matter to people who might not have thought about it in that context. So, anyway, if you enjoyed this, or if you didn't, give us a like, give us a subscribe, comment your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts and your experiences. Maybe you have some funny stories about trying to convey the differences between these subject matters to someone, or maybe you learned something cool here, or maybe you have some experience installing some of these things and can share that with the rest of us. That would be awesome. And yeah, my book, the Audio Mutt Studios Little Book of Guitar Warm-Ups and Exercises, is available. It is out in print on demand through Barnes & Nobles. It is available through my website as both a PDF and as guitar profiles. Of course, we still have merchandise through Spreadshop. All that stuff is available if you want to pick up any Audio Mutt merch. I will be keeping in touch with you guys on upcoming stuff. I'm still working on, if you've been seeing the shorts, I've documented each step of the process of modifying a Harley Benton DC606. With DC600 VI, I'm assuming the VI is 6. It's kind of wiry. Anyway, it's an SG style 3 pickup guitar. So I modified that heavily. I do have the finished guitar, but I'm trying to get all the shorts out and kind of show each step of the process. And then I'll do a compilation of all those shorts and put it out before I actually do a video review talking about the whole thing, and do another one of these talking heads, and do some audio clips and stuff. So all that is coming. It's in the works, and yeah, lots of cool stuff coming down the pipeline. Gonna keep rocking and rolling. But that's it for this video. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. You're awesome, and have a good one.